It shows in cartoon form a drawing of what appears to be Leon Trotsky, a fellow communist leader besides Nikolai Lenin in Russia, sitting at a large board with the following quote, "Plan of action for the United States," end quote, written on the top. It says this: spend, spend, spend under the guise of recovery. Bust the government, blame the capitalists for the failure, junk the Constitution, and declare a dictatorship. That sounds exactly like what is happening in the United States today. Now let me return to the discussion of Lenin's quote. The third thing he said is that inflation will steal from most, but it actually enriches some. And here's why. The poor do not have money, so they're not directly affected. The middle class has its wealth in money, meaning the money they get paid for their labor and which they use to pay their bills. They put whatever they can save into banks, but inflation destroys the value of their money in banks as well. The rich do not place their assets in money. They invest in stocks, art, property, etc. So as the value of money decreases, their value in their assets generally rise. That is what Keynes meant. The rich are the ones who benefit the most in periods of hyperinflation. Then he repeats it. The best way to destroy capitalism is to debauch the currency. And then he said that only 1 in a million would be able to diagnose the problem. But now you know, so you are the one person in a million who understands just how money can be used to destroy. I would also like to point something else out about the economist John Maynard Keynes, because he wanted to destroy the capitalist system as well. Notice here that the real title of his book, The Economic Consequences of the Peace, is The End of Laissez-faire, which is French for the free enterprise system. So it was not just Lenin who wanted to destroy capitalism, it was John Maynard Keynes as well. This is what he said about the capitalist system. The decadent capitalism in the hands of which we found ourselves after World War I is not a success. It is not intelligent. It is not beautiful. It is not just. It is not virtuous. And it does not deliver the goods. In short, we dislike it and are beginning to despise it. So his writings were intended to support those who wish to destroy the capitalist system. Now I would like to show you that the ideas of John Maynard Keynes have had effect all over the world. As this presentation was being prepared, nations in various parts of the world have experienced rioting in the streets to protest the cuts in government budgets due to the ideas of Mr. Keynes. Mr. Keynes has advanced the idea that government spending is the answer to the alleged weaknesses of the economy. And governments have increased their entitlement funding, meaning they have increased the amount of money the government spends to give its citizens government handouts. After a while, the government discovers that they cannot find enough ways to fund all of these entitlements, and they start reducing the amount of money they pay the citizen. When the citizens learn that the government is cutting their entitlements, they go to the streets in violent demonstrations protesting the cuts. And all of these nations listened to John Maynard Keynes. This is Dr. Friedrich Hayek, a prominent member of the Austrian School of Economics and a 1974 Nobel Prize winner. This is how he described it. The responsibility for current worldwide inflation rests wholly and squarely with the economists who've embraced the teachings of John Maynard Keynes. It was on the advice and even urging of his pupils that governments have financed the increasing parts of their expenditures by creating money on a scale which every reputable economist before Keynes would have predicted would cause precisely the sort of inflation we have got. So we must acknowledge the brilliance of the architect of this strategy to destroy the free enterprise system. Thank you, John Maynard Keynes. The world truly owes you a huge debt of gratitude. Actually, I should say the world truly owes you a huge debt. Now that we know that the communists want to destroy capitalism, I think it is appropriate to discuss where Lenin, the communist, learned how he should do this. This is Karl Marx, the so-called father of communism. And this is the 100th anniversary edition of the Communist Manifesto that he wrote for the Communist Party in 1848. And here, it is in here that he declared that the communists should destroy the value of the money owned by the middle class. This is what he wrote on page 45. The proletariat, defined as the working class, the poor, meaning the lowest class in the nation, will use its political supremacy to wrest, by degrees, all capital from the bourgeoisie. Now the bourgeoisie is defined as the middle class, not the very wealthy. And then he tells the communists how to use a list of 10 measures that will destroy the capitalist system. I shall concentrate on the fifth one as it has bearing to our study of the Federal Reserve, and this is what he wrote. Number 5, centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank with an exclusive monopoly. So with the central bank in their hands, the communists could wrest all of the capital from the middle class. And President Woodrow Wilson and the Congress of the United States followed the teaching of the communist Karl Marx in 1913 when they created a national bank with an exclusive monopoly called the Federal Reserve. So the power to destroy by using money to inflate the economy was given to a central bank in the United States, just as the communist Karl Marx had instructed our government. Please notice that the communist Marx wanted to use the poor as a way of wresting all of the capital from the middle class, as I said, not the very wealthy. And the reason for that is that it is the very wealthy of a nation who want to destroy the middle class in that nation by the use of a central bank. And the major reason is that the middle class often has collected enough capital to compete with the rich class. And they do so by lowering the price of any product they manufacture. And the very wealthy decided to create an economic system called communism to restrict the ability of the middle class to compete. And that is the way that they did that, because they learned to debauch the currency through a central bank. So it has been the very wealthy who are the ones behind the communist movements of the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries. I cover this in my book entitled The Unseen Hand, and I would once again recommend that you read it. I will provide you with the ample documentation that it is the very wealthy who found the advantages of supporting the communist movement. Let me now provide you with the two recent examples of the use of hyperinflation to destroy. This is a 500 billion denarii bill issued as recently as the 1990s in the European nation formerly known as Yugoslavia. The young man who sent it to me as an example of hyperinflation told me that it wouldn't even buy an egg. That is called hyperinflation. A second example of hyperinflation is occurring right now in Zimbabwe, the African nation formerly known as Rhodesia. This is a picture of a Zimbabwean trillionaire holding up a 100 trillion Zim dollar in January of 2011. The tourist in Zimbabwe can purchase one for $5 American. That is also called hyperinflation. Now, I do not know why the government in Rhodesia, or actually Zimbabwe, is hyperinflating their currency, but my guess is that it is because the people in that nation are poor, which means they do not have a lot of money. So the government solved the problem by giving everyone, or making everyone, a trillionaire. Then everyone can purchase the goods that they could not afford in the past. Of course, when there's a shortage of goods, no matter how much money you have, there's nothing to buy. This is one of the fallacies of the socialist or communist economy. They think that poverty is abolished by giving everyone money. But they're wrong. Poverty is abolished by increasing the amount of products produced, thereby enabling producers to compete by lowering prices. Producers of goods want their customers to have a living wage so that they can buy their products. The proof of the destruction caused by hyperinflation lies in its results. Unemployment in Zimbabwe has risen to 85%, and the gross domestic product has declined from $720 per capita in 2002 to $265 in 2008. Yes, hyperinflation works to destroy. Let me now start the discussion of who in America controls the amount of money in circulation. The Constitution of the United States delegated the authority to make money to Congress. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 says this: Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, and fix the standard of weights and measures. First of all, notice that they included this power to coin money in the section in which they set the standard of weights and measures. America uses a foot as a measure of length, and they were saying that there was a nationwide standard of a foot being exactly 12 inches in length. The reason they wanted it fixed is so that anyone in America could rely on the foot as an equal measurement. A foot in Georgia would be equal to a foot in Arizona. However, this was written before the day of the 7-foot centers in professional basketball. A foot is not a foot when you're over 7 feet tall. But our founding fathers were obviously hoping that our dollar would have a constant value anywhere in the United States. But as we are seeing and will continue to see, money does not have a constant value. And that is because the bankers do not want a dollar to have a constant value, because the bankers can make a profit as they increase and then decrease the quantity of money, as long as they're the ones increasing and decreasing the quantity of money, and strangely enough, they are. I've often wanted to write a national best-selling book on how to make a killing in the stock market. It would only have one page, which would read, buy low, sell high. And if you knew which way the market was going to move, because you knew when the money supply would be increased or decreased, you could make a killing in the stock market by buying low and selling high.